Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to the Heartland Hot Dish, where we come back to the table to rediscover the connections and meaning to our food, savory gateway to the culinary treasures of the Great Lakes region. Join us as we rediscover the traditions and stories woven into the fabric of the Heartland cuisine. From the iconic dishes that define the Midwest to the hidden gems waiting to be discovered, we'll take you on a mouth-watering journey through the diverse culinary landscape of the Great Lakes area. Get ready to indulge your senses and ignite your appetite as we explore the rich tapestry of flavors that make up the Heartland Hot Dish. I'm your host, Kieron Hales, and today we're going to be delving into the Pantheon. We've made many different words we're going to use instead of Pantheon, but we're going to end on Pantheon of pizzas. Really excited. I was just up for Mother's Day in New Buffalo eating 1,001 pizzas. It's probably the one meal that one of my children will eat. So let's pull up a table and talk about pizza. So, Daniel, welcome. We've also got Lee in the room today as we talk pizza. Tell us about why pizza, Daniel.
Everyone can connect to pizza. Pizza feels like it's been around forever, but it hasn't. But the thing about pizza that I love, and the thing that I really want to communicate today, is the panoply of pizza.
See, you can say the word, and I could not say that word.
I can, but I did like Parthenon too because it ties back into these the roots of the food. But it really has turned into this food that has connected with local communities and has evolved locally in so many different ways. So here we are, and we're sitting in Ann Arbor, Michigan, right? So Detroit-style pizza is our closest regional style of pizza. But all throughout the Midwest, there are all different styles of pizza. And you can arguably say that Chicago, is the more famous one. But even in Chicago, there's multiple different styles. And we've got Ohio to talk about. We've got the Quad Cities. We've got Pennsylvania and New York. And all of these are different. All of them, I believe, are special. I happen to be one of those people who believes that all pizza is beautiful, so you'll never hear me yucking on Chicago-style pizza, even though I am a New Yorker.
So you love the pineapple on the pizza? You're a happy boy?
So that's a great question. And this is one that comes up a lot, right? Because there are some folks who are vehemently opposed to pineapple on pizza, and I hear them and I respect them. My personal opinion is that pineapple is a very difficult topping to work with for a couple of reasons. One, it is wet. The other is did I say two reasons? I'm gonna have more.
Feels like you're against the pineapple.
There's a lot of bad pineapple on the market. The canned pineapple that is chunked and super sweet, that's gonna be challenging to work with on a pizza. But when you're working with pineapple on pizza, the most important thing is to bring it into balance. And there's ways of doing that. Personally, I believe balancing that that sweetness with heat and saltiness, so doing something like jalapeno and bacon along with that pineapple, as long as it's the right pineapple, can work.
I think for me, because I am a pineapple guy, I think I'm 100%. I grew up on gammon steaks and pineapple grilled gammon steak, and a gammon steak is really like a simple ham that's been grilled. And then you got a piece of grilled pineapple. And so those two things together were always very happy in my brain. So we're going to put that on a pizza and be happy. But I don't disagree. The wet pineapple, not a happy place. You want that pre-roasted before it's gone on in a happy place. I know we're going to diverge right into pineapple instantly.
Well, I think it's actually a good segue for talking about different styles of pizza, because a lot of people, when they think about pizza, automatically think about New York style pizza, New York thin crust. Now, that's probably talking about my coastal sensibilities, and that's probably not what somebody in Chicago is thinking. But let's take that for granted and given for right now. When you're working with that style of pizza, that is a very thin crust pizza, right? It makes the pineapple much harder to work with. It's heavy, it's wet. There are some styles of pizza in the Northeast. Let's talk about Trenton tomato pie. That is even thinner than New York style. And the way that they make that work is they put the tomatoes on the top. They put the cheese on the bottom, tomatoes on the top, and that helps to protect that very thin and crispy crust. But when you come back to the Midwest, and you are here in Detroit, and you're making your pies with thick crust in a pan, all of a sudden, that moisture content is not as critical as
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is for some other styles. And which is not to say that there aren't Midwestern styles that are thin and crispy, because absolutely there are too.
Yeah, because I think when I originally got here, I grew up in Europe, and obviously that thin, ultra thin pizza was my game. Like, I want a pizza that takes 60 to 90 seconds to cook, and we're done and we're happy. It's the pizza I cook at home with my kids and my family. One, it's quick and easy relatively. You got the dough, you're a happy person, you're off to the races. When I think of like deep dish pizza, I'm just thinking of a fancy focaccia. Like, that's where my brain goes, that happy little fancy focaccia piece of the side of the pizza. Um, when you talk about like the different styles and what it is, I just wonder, like, as far as like the history, like that foundational, maybe like a good 2-3 minutes, Daniel, of like why and what pizza, like that baseline of pizza. How did we get here? It is so much of like those three fast foods that we eat, right? You know, you've got your burgers, your fried chicken, and you've got your pizza. Those are your go-to pretty much every fast food. It's the way to make money. Pizza's probably the winner because you're really just selling water and flour with a little bit of toppings on top. I just like a little brief history from you, sir.
Sure. Well, history is not really my strong point, right? But it did evolve, right? And we have these Italian American immigrant populations. I think who move into different parts of the country, and they use the ingredients that they have, on hand. Sometimes these result in really beautiful and wonderful things that we have recognized as pizza. And sometimes, there are locals who have some other bent that they want to impose upon the pizza. And I think the story of the Chicago stuffed pizza is a great example of that, because it was a Texan who
Oh,
was in
really?
Chicago who decided, as a Texan would, that pizza would be better if it were bigger.
I love this world.
And that makes sense, right? So they started off making these bigger pizzas because, pizza was still evolving. Forms weren't locked into stone, right? There hadn't been these regional identities. And because nobody else was doing anything like this, I believe it was the Chicago Tribune who coined this as Chicago's own pizza.
Yeah.
And then it really took on a life of its own.
I think that's fascinating. It was a Texan. I would never have put that down. I think that's an awesome place of Chicago
But when I
pizza
say it, it
from
makes
Texas.
sense, right?
Sure,
Right,
absolutely.
yes, right. But Chicago adopted it as its own, which is also kind of interesting, because the stuffed style pizza, which I think most people outside of Chicago think of as Chicago pizza,
Yep.
is not the most popular pizza in Chicago. Right, so Chicago also has, right, so if we're thinking about Chicago pizza, and just to contextualize it, right, if you've had Lou Malnati's pizza, right, that is what I am calling a stuffed pizza.
Okay.
It has a bottom crust,
Yep.
right, it is filled with cheese. If you're going to put the pepperoni in, that's going to go in there over the cheese, but then you're going to have another crust that goes on top, and then a layer of tomatoes over that.
See, most of the deep dish I've probably had is like one crust, not a double crust in the way
Sure.
it was. Yep.
So that's why I want to make, and lots of folks will conflate those two, and that's right, and that's not wrong, because is it a deep? Is it in a dish? Absolutely.
Yep.
Right, but it is stuffed because it has that second crust and the tomatoes on top. There is also a Chicago deep dish, which let's call thick. We'll call it a thick crust pizza, just to differentiate it from the stuffed crust. And that would be a place like Pequod's or Bert's Place. And I wish Marcy were here, because Marcy and I have gotten in a fight before about Pequod's, specifically because she was asserting that was very much like Detroit-style pizza. Because it's in a dish, and because it's thick, and because cheese goes out to the edge and it caramelizes around, right, that there are definitely similarities between the two, but there are also differentiations and distinctions. And in the world of pizza, when we talk about regional pizza styles, these small differences really make a big impact.
Yeah.
Right? So, what differentiates places like Pequod's from Detroit-style pizza, we're thinking about, some of the, the pillars of that, like Buddy's, Louie's, and Cloverleaf, is that these are, the Detroit-style pizza are in rectangular pans as opposed to the circular ones.
Yep.
So it's going to be a different form factor.
And that comes back from the tool trays, right? That's the story, at least.
That's the
that I know.
apocryphal story, is that Detroit-style pizza came from the auto workers, and the middle
Dumped out a
trades.
tray and like, oh, it's pre-oiled, ready to go.
I don't think it was that, but but it has corners, and corners are great if you love things like baked lasagna, right? Or even there's people who love brownies and will prefer the corner pieces because of all the crispiness that comes with that. You don't get that in the circular pizza that you would get in Chicago. And then, of course, the question of where the sauce goes plays a big piece of this. And then in Detroit, the sauce goes on top. It's done in racing stripes. Is the story?
That's wild because, like, as a Brit, pizza was one thing. It was crust. It was your DiGiorno's pizza, right? Crust, sauce, cheese. That's it. There is no discussion of there being any other ways to go. The Americans definitely were like, hey, let's have some fun with this.
Well, yes and no, because, right, this is why I really am excited about this opportunity to tell these stories, because for so many Americans, pizza is still one thing. And in fact, there's an entire idea of pizza cognition theory, which goes back to talk about this. And the idea, and I wish I had the name of who came up with it so I could attribute it, because it's not mine. It's just a thing that I've heard and internalized, and I think makes a lot of sense. The idea behind pizza cognition theory is that the pizza you grew up with is pizza, and that's your good pizza, and everything else is a shadow of that. It's
I don't know.
Reminds me of pizza.
My mom made homemade pizza, and it was like dry, hard bread that had sauce on the top. As Brits, we didn't really know how to make pizza dough. I feel like we took stale bread and turned it into pizza was our world.
Well, and that also exists out there in America too, right? Because I was talking before about some of the history and about these Italian communities who moved to places in America and do the best with what they have. And, right, I don't want to be rude to the food. I don't want to, get us into trouble. But in Pennsylvania,
Oh, we're going to talk about Scrapple?
I would love to talk about Scrapple. I would even love to talk about this on pizza. However, no.
Scrapple on pizza? That's terrifying.
It sounds wonderful to me. It would have to be the right pizza and then balance, right?
Sure.
Right. The
We
standards.
take the less oily version of Scrapple.
The standards still hold. But in Pennsylvania is a town called Altoona.
Yep.
And Altoona, and I've been going to Altoona for decades, and in fact, decades before I even realized that Altoona pizza was a thing and its own regional style. And I think largely some of that is because a lot of the shops there don't trade on it as Altoona style pizza.
I feel everyone who's listening to this is like, there is no such thing. I now need to go to Altoona and try this thing.
Well, you kind of do. It had a moment on the internet because it is so shocking to look upon. And I went to one of the places, that was trading upon it as Altoona style pizza. And once I did that, I started looking around to say, okay, there've got to be other places that are making this. And at one place just up the road, they called it Nona's Pizza, right? And Nona was the Italian grandmother. And I just think about the grandmother who came to this country and was looking for some of the flavors, of her homeland to try to put on this, on this Americanized version. And all she could come up with was American cheese, salami, and green peppers. and that's what this is. And that's the Altoona style pizza. And people there love it. I gave a slice of it to my brother-in-law who grew up in the region but had never had it before.
Yep.
And he liked it. For me, it was a little bit of a struggle. I was able to respect it for what it was, and I could also enjoy it as a really nice, comforting food. And I think it reminds me that the reason why I'm talking about this, of course, is your mom. It sounds like, just cheesy bread with a little bit of meat and, cheese toast.
Well, there's that wonderful, I have a very, I think I've talked about on other podcasts where I talk about like my fond memory of like apple candy, but American cheese as a Brit was like this what? And when you, as a Brit, we just made cheese on toast with it. And it like burns on top real quick when you broil it. Like it gets that weird crust. And the only other place you got it was like a McDonald's. And like McDonald's when I was growing up in the like mid late 80s was a rare thing, especially where I came from, the UK. There was one or two of them. So yeah, that cheese, that American cheese on a pizza, viscerally takes me back to that fun memory of cheap cheese on toast. I talked about in another podcast my love of fancy cheese on toast. I love all cheese on toast, and really pizza is that in that world.
Oh, absolutely. And as a side note, I got much more comfortable with American cheese slices after reading what was it? It was the Molecular Gastronomy at Home. I can't remember
Yeah, yeah,
exactly
yeah,
what
yeah,
that book
yep,
was, right? But
yep.
but what they were talked about was sodium citrate, and that sodium citrate is a wonderful ingredient to be able to use with cheese just to make it impossibly silky and smooth. And then I realized that hey, American cheese slices are just cheese with the sodium citrate already baked in,
Yep.
and right, and using those for things like grilled cheese sandwiches or egg and cheese sandwiches in the morning.
I cannot think of a chef I know that doesn't still use them, at least at home, right? You still love, and I mean Michelin star chefs that still have that moment in your. And now we're just talking about American cheese. We could probably do that, Daniel. We could have a whole podcast on the history of American cheese.
And that would be fun too. So right, so we're hit on some of the Pennsylvania, some of the the Altoona style, but that's not the only regional style that's in Pennsylvania either, right? So Pennsylvania is also. I can't mention Pennsylvania and pizza without talking about Old Forge, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Right. I don't know if you're familiar with Old.
I am. I took notes on that one before we came in because I was like, he's going to do this one for sure.
Right, because it brands itself as Pizza Town, USA, which is an audacious claim for a place in.
Was there somebody from Texas there too? Because I feel like that's a Texan thing to be able to do.
It's a great marketing thing, and the question is, how do they possibly justify this small town outside of Scranton as Pizza Town, USA? But I know this, right, and it is because Old Forge has the most number of pizza places per capita anywhere in the U.S. And the denominator is pretty small, which certainly helps. But there they also have their own style of pizza, and in fact they have two. There's the Old Forge Red, and then there's the Old Forge White.
Oh, okay.
Right, and the Old Forge Red is another thick style pizza. It's done in a pan. It's served in cuts. Everything there is done in cuts, or you can order the whole sheet of it. The red has a red sauce, and the cheese on top. It looks very much like a pizza that you might recognize as pizza. You see that, and it's like, oh, that looks like pizza. The white, on the other hand, is a whole different story, and I actually have a soft spot for the white myself.
I love a white pizza. I have a affinity to a mustard pizza and a white pizza, sometimes way more than a tomato pizza. You've had too many of them in your world.
Right, well, and remind me to talk about mustard pizza in a second as soon as I talk about the white, because
we're getting mustard pizza. I've got it in bold on a piece of paper in front of me.
I do not want to forget that. But my favorite of the whites is a place called Arcaro and Chanel, and it doesn't actually look like pizza. It's almost like a sheet of a calzone. It has a bottom crust, it has a top crust, and then it is stuffed with cheese. And it's this molten, melty cheese that can stick to the roof of your mouth. I like it with a little bit of vegetables in it. They would do one with like a broccoli and garlic.
That's such a wild invention from somebody.
Yes, and it's I think the hardest part is trying to conceptualize what they serve you as pizza, because with the bottom crust and the top crust, there's no tomatoes on it. It's kind of like a stuffed bread.
Yep.
But it's delicious, and that's and it's one of their main styles of pizza.
When I think of that, I think of I mean, me and my son watch a lot of like Barstool Sports, the one pizza slice, one bite, and it linked to another one where they've got that bowl pizza where you bake it in like a pie tin. And when I say pie, I mean pie, Kieron pie, so British pie, meat pie. It's almost like a suet pudding mold, and they invert it, and the dough's in there, and it's kind of wet. Like the dough hasn't even got crispy. It's kind of loosely baked pita bread, but it's molten cheese over the whole thing. It's kind of wild.
Right, but you know, but
And they
cheese.
call it pizza. And I'm like, that is a suet pudding that you have just made.
Right, and I had a friend who would say that you know, that the white pizza of Old Forge was a hot pocket. Right, and you know, and she wasn't wrong, right?
Sure.
Right, but these are the way that that things evolve, right? Much like, I suppose, mustard pies,
Oh,
right?
but well, sorry. Before we go mustard pies, when you say hot pocket, I mean my kids. I think Henry, who's 11 now, just got introduced to pizza bites, like the little microwave guys, at somebody like a friend's house. And I was like, he's like, that's not pizza. Like, that's got nothing to do with pizza. I'm like, well, it's got all the same ingredients in a different shape. And that's what's going on with it. It is wild. Even that, like, that is a purely an American thing. I don't think, like, pizza pockets, the bagel pizza bite thing with those little tiny dice things. When I think of those things, like, that is covered under the pizza genre, which is kind of crazy.
I suppose the question is, and this would be for another conversation, is
Sure.
are they dumplings?
Sure. No,
Right.
100%. Like, well, when you microwave, they're not as good. I mean,
Mm.
we then brought some in our house for the first time ever, and they're in the top drawer of our freezer right now, and we probably had like one plate. Microwave versus baked versus they are very different things, like completely different
Right.
things.
And I feel like they really want to be deep fried. Right, like, you know, they may say that you should be doing them in some other way, but
I have
really,
never thought of deep frying them,
Oh,
and I
for-
am gonna go deep fry them tonight.
yes, that
I mean, I fry a lot of stuff in our house, and I have not thought about that.
I myself don't allow our house to have a fryer for this very reason.
Oh,
because
I've
I would fry everything.
Okay. Sorry. We can go to pizza pie. My favorite of the pies. And I know we're talking regional pies, but gosh, I don't know which mustard you've loved or seen and been out there, but and this is not my love of the French, but Dijon mustard as the base for a mustard pizza pie is life changing.
Right. So my only exposure to mustard pies was in Trenton, New Jersey.
Really?
Right. So in Trenton, New Jersey, where it's the home of Trenton tomato pies, they also have a version that is a mustard pie on the menu that you can go and you can get. And I, of course, as somebody who is curious, had to go and try the mustard pie. And as long as we were going mustard, right? And again, it was, you know, mustard under, it was the crust and then mustard and then cheese.
Was it a mustard sauce or it was mustard?
It was mustard.
Yeah, yeah. For us, we've
Yes.
just done slightly let down. I mean, all mustard is ground mustard seeds with water and vinegar in there. So it's a slightly looser piece. And then we always did it. I mean, we do it at the farm for late night snacks for weddings. But like, you just put that very thin layer of like a good hot mustard. I've done it with English mustard, which is by far the superior of all the mustards. But it's too much. Dijon just mellows that thing out. I don't know if is it Ray's yellow mustard? Is it
Raised yellow
Maine?
mustard
it
is
Maine?
is what Zingerman's Deli uses.
Yeah, is that
for-
Maine? I think it's Maine.
That's correct.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is equally perfect mustard pizza. Well, just the change, and people are like, "Oh no, I don't like mustard." I'm like, "Oh no, 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 give this a whirl. It's not mustard free. It's you got so much bread basically in there, and then you've got the saltiness of usually some kind of like pork product that's gone on the top of a mustard pizza."
Well, for us, when I was exploring this with my friend, we went and went full salty, you know, and went with the anchovies. And that was-
Ooh,
yeah.
mustard anchovy.
Mustard and anchovies.
Lee, you're putting up your thumbs. I see your desire of an anchovy pizza over there.
Yes, I love anchovies. And just to let you know, I did a little bit of research while you were chatting, and it was Sam Sifton, the New York food critic, that developed the pizza cognitive theory. So.
Thank you very much.
So the mustard pizza there, it is, do you know which mustard they've used?
I do not, but it was my memory was it
Like
was,
Dijon-ish?
no, I believe it's still more of a yellow
A
mustard.
yellow mustard,
Yeah,
okay.
that's correct.
I don't think I've seen it elsewhere in the world. So when we made it at the farm, I thought I was a genius in my own, like, oh, look, let's do this. I like mustard on a pizza pie. Let's do this. And I was like, oh, no, it does exist in the world. Recreating, like, I'd never heard of it before. And I was like, oh, no, we're going to make mustard pies. That same day of creativity at the farm, we also made a s'mores pizza pie. That is a terrible decision, and no one should ever attempt it. It does not work.
Can I just interject something?
Yeah.
You should only be eating s'mores if you're sitting around a campfire. I'm sorry.
Oh, we were sitting around a campfire with quite a lot of beer inside us at the point that we created a s'mores pizza pie. But the chocolate does not do well on said pizza pie. And we put it on late, we put it on early, we buried it, we didn't bury it. None part of that worked very well.
S'mores should only be on graham crackers.
That'd be true. All right, Daniel.
But you raise an interesting point about independent creation of the mustard pie. That you did this, and all of a sudden it was also this other thing that
Right,
was over there.
I thought I was like, oh, I've actually had an an affinity moment. You know, it's that person that created like the croissant donut. You're like, oh, I actually did something brand new in the food industry. That doesn't exist very often. And then when you Google, you're like, oh, somebody's got here before me.
Well, right. Well, the interesting thing too is trying to untangle some of this stuff in the world of pizza and in the world of food in general, right? So, but there is a pizza story that I'm still working on untangling, which could be a case of this independent creation, or they could have one have been influenced by the other. And I was thinking specifically about a style of pizza that really gets very little attention, which is cold cheese pizza.
Yeah, you've got everyone's interest in like we've all had cold pizza,
Right, we've
that
all
has been left under the couch
Right.
or by the bed by the morning after, but intentionally cold cheese pizza.
cold cheese pizza, and saying cold cheese pizza is a little bit of a misnomer because it's not all cold. It's hot and cold. It reminds me a little bit of the McDLT from way back in the age where the hot side was hot and the cool side was cold.
I still thought that was a good idea. Maybe not the best use of containers, but still a lot of fun.
Fair. Right. So this exists in Ohio. Right. So in the Ohio Valley, there's a style of pizza around Steubenville. DeCarlo's is a place that you can look up if you want to get this cold cheese
I
pizza.
feel like you just said Steubenville, and it was a perfect name for where this thing was created.
And what they do is they'll cook the pizza, they'll heat you a slice, and then from that hot slice, they will present it to you covered then with a thick layer of cold shredded cheese. And what happens, at least in theory, is that
Is it the pizza oven broke and turned off midway through?
so there is cooked cheese on it, and then this cold cheese goes on top of the cooked cheese. And what is supposed to happen is the heat from the slice of pizza is supposed to melt that bottom layer of the cold cheese, or at least warm it up a little bit. So what you've got is a variety of textures and temperatures, that you get to enjoy as you're
Which
eating
cheeses
this
are we
pizza.
talking? Like mozzarella?
It's still mozzarella.
Oh, see, are we all like? I'm sorry. Now I'm going to diverge into a cheese well because you've got to cold cheese, but like, so we cook pizza in our house at least once or twice a week. We have dough that's sitting in the fridge. We've made it in advance, so we've got the raw dough, and we make cheese pizza in our house because I have the pickiest family in the universe, and I can make one meal 4 ways. Everyone's happy. My wife will only have mozzarella on her pizza, and that is so weird to me. Like I would love, and I usually do, pure Parmesan. Just straight Parmesan cheese. No other blend, nothing else. And then if I want to be fancy, I get a very expensive, and I mean stupidly like $40 a pound, $50 a pound cheddar from the deli, and I'll grate that and use that as my pizza. So cheese, is mozzarella, I mean, it just seems like such not the right cheese for that boost of flavor, especially cold.
So so there are a bunch of different cheeses that happen around the country that different regions will subscribe to. And you're right. I knew this one place in upstate New York, and they used a special kind of brick cheese from one cheese provider, and they were using it for 100 years, and they were the last account that this cheesemaker had.
Widmer Brick. I know now you talk brick cheeses. Widmer Brick is like a killer cheese on again, posh cheese on toast.
Sure.
Brain.
But but I think when people are trying to add a little bit of flair and flavor to pizzas, generally where it comes in is not with the main cheese, but with the seasoning cheese, a finishing cheese. So some folks will use Parmesan, some folks will use Pecorino. There is an outfit in Philadelphia that was using this aged Gouda. But the finishing cheese, what you sort of put on the end, right, to sort of give it a little bit more boost of flavor, can really be one of those things that will set a pie apart, and that and I think has some wider general agreement among pizza makers that, okay, if I'm going to take some liberties with pizza, my finishing cheese is going to be it. But the cold cheese, I want to just get back to the cold cheese and the independent creation because I didn't want to lose that thought. And that was that, yes, so we've got this cold cheese pizza out in Steubenville, but there's also...
It's a competitor, isn't there?
Well,
Somebody else is like,
right.
I'm going to win this game.
I don't know. This is what I really want to still untangle. And maybe somebody who's listening might have the key to this and can respond in the comments. But there is also in Oneonta, New York, cold cheese pizza that is remarkably similar, if not identical to them. So I have yet to figure out if Oneonta came first, or Steubenville came first, or if this was an independent creation. But I could see it potentially going either way.
I just love that there's a second one with also an odd name of a city that we're...
Well, and it's not even that it's a second producer, because there are many more places that make this pie. So I think there are at least 2 in Oneonta and even more in the Ohio Valley. So you can go out there, and I'm looking forward to hopefully with you guys doing a field trip, because there's so much interesting regional food around Ohio. The other one that is really tickling my fancy at the moment are the Akron sauerkraut balls. Which are like pork meatballs mixed with sauerkraut and then deep fried.
Oh, I like that.
I do too.
I like the idea of a meatball surrounded by sauerkraut, then breaded and deep fried. So you've got like the layer, what is it? The
like
egg,
a Scotch egg,
like a Scotch egg.
Right.
Yeah.
But I believe the sauerkraut is actually mixed into the pork. But we can go and we can explore.
No, I see. We're in the world of the farm. We changed over to family style meals. We on that previous podcast when we were talking about it in the family table, and so when we were rechanging a lot of our cocktail appetizers, trying to get back into that. Okay, so our pizza world, I think when we talk about regional pizzas and the whys and the whats and the ingredients and what tops the pizza, you talked a little bit about cheese. I still think Parmesan by far and away the better cheese, or a really good cheddar. You never hear anyone use a cheddar. It melts and is a little oily, but if you get a really dry, extra mature cheddar, which is way too expensive, you should not melt on a pizza unless you're British. I think like the other toppings, when we talk about the other toppings that make its way to pizza, we've always had the pepperoni and the fake, not real pepperoni. We've got bacon. We've got those other meats. What is that for you? Like, what are the quintessential like top 10 toppings that make Daniel's Pizza world?
Wow, top 10. That's a long list, and I'm not really sure.
12 and a half.
I have very strong feelings about pepperoni. Right.
Oh, I like this.
There's, as far as I can tell, there's one pepperoni that's worth eating, and that's the cup and char pepperoni.
Yes.
The pepperoni that lays flat, I have really no interest in. It's
my entire family is supportive of you, and the other should be banned or removed from the world.
Right. It's just not that interesting, and I know that it's beloved by so many people.
Really? I just think they haven't tried the other one.
So what's so interesting is that the industrial pepperoni exists for a reason.
Everything does. And
right.
there are people supporting it clearly, right?
Right. So, and I acknowledge and I understand why people don't like the better pepperoni, which is the cup and char. And it's really 2 things. American consumers are very sensitive about things that they consider to be burnt. And this is a huge issue when it comes to pizza in general. So I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk about this, because so many pizza places have been conditioned by their customers to undercook their pizzas.
Oh, not in the Hales household. We are crispy, extra crispy in our world.
Right, because there are pizza makers and who I'm friends with who have shared with me photos of pizzas that have been returned because they were burnt that looked perfect. And they looked beautiful, and Lorenzo was sharing
that leopard skin, like char on the bottom of the pizza base. Happy place.
Right. So Lorenzo had to share this photo with me just to have somebody to vent to have somebody who understood. But so he learned to undercook his pizzas if he wanted to be in business, right? Because he couldn't be in business making the pizzas that he wanted to make. Things that had bubbles on them, crust bubbles, because those crust bubbles also burn and they move aside the cheese. And then they get to the door, somebody's like, where did all my cheese on this slice go? right? But those crust bubbles, I cherish. I think lots of other people, pizza lovers, cherish as well.
Well, we were just, I might have mentioned it earlier, we were just up in New Buffalo. And regardless of the places, we went to a lot of pizza with my kids. And there were two very different pizza joints. And the one place that we ate at had amazing crust. The dough was exceptional. They nailed it sideways. It was so good. Maybe not flavor wise, it probably needed a little more salt in the actual dough, but as far as the bubble and the crust and the crispiness was nailed. And then it felt like they gave up. Like the sauce and the toppings and the things let the entirety of the pizza down. This other place, I mean, I'll name the place we loved. It was like, I think it was Patelli's. It's not New Buffalo. It's like New Buffalo adjacent. And they don't open for many hours of the day. We waited for them. We were the first person to order with them. I do like that they sell elderflower soda, which makes me always happy anywhere that does. It's opposite Frolinger's, which is up there. But their pizza, I wouldn't say the crust was as bubbly and crisp, but the toppings, the sauce, the cheese, because dough is harder. Like, I feel like dough is way harder. But then this place had just completely fallen apart on the topping side of it and the crust side of it.
Right, and that can totally happen, right? And I've evaluated pizza competitions. I've been a judge in pizza competitions.
Really?
Yes, and sometimes when you're doing that, and when you're comparing a couple of different places
I forget
against
to
each other,
like you're author of writing into like newspapers and different things of that, of doing those competition things. That's true, yeah.
it's it's fun, but it's hard, but it's also very informative because when you're faced with two pieces of pizza, right, and two very different ones, you're looking at which at competing flaws and at the same time competing things that they've done very, very well.
Well, this Patelli's, like, the crust wasn't bad. I mean, guys, your pizza was great. My son gave you like a 9.8. They were incredibly happy. The only problem was it was too big, right? And it was great as a family of four getting a too big a pizza. Good problem. It was delicious. I ate it for the entirety of 4 days I was in New Buffalo. We went and got a second one and we kept it, and I continued to eat the same pizza, even though we ate 5 different pizzas in New Buffalo in 4 days. But the problem was it was just too big, and the dough in the center couldn't win. Whereas this other place, which I won't mention their name, the crust was perfect, the size was perfect. But then the topping, just like the sauce, the cheese, it's like they've forgotten to introduce salt into their diets in any way, shape, or form.
Right, and I too have experienced brilliant pizza places who have fallen short on execution and on specific pies because they've gone, perhaps they've gone too creative.
This menu had like weird and wacky things, and you'd think it was good. We had ordered a prosciutto, a white cheese prosciutto for me and my wife, and then the prosciutto wasn't crispy at all. And I'm like, I get that you maybe just want to do a raw prosciutto on the top, but it had been baked.
Oh.
But it wasn't at all crispy. And
Right.
like, if you're gonna cook prosciutto, you want prosciutto crisps at that point.
Right. So, thinking about things that are crispy, right, and prosciutto and toppings, I think is a very good segue back into my point about pepperoni, which I wanted.
I know I'm still gonna bring you back to
Right.
your top 10. You
It's-
can go to your pepperoni story though.
It's the other downside of the pepperoni that I love, the cup and char, right? And one of the things that I prize about it, right, are those bursts of flavor you get in the wells of the pepperoni, where the oils of
Liquid hot magma that's trying to kill you.
exactly, but also intensely flavorful in those bursts of flavor because fat is flavor. And I watch
I'm a very flavorful human being.
I watch consumers with horror and dread take napkins to their beautiful pieces of pizza
oh my lordy,
to
yes.
blot off the grease. And I know that this is a thing that people do and that people are concerned about their health, but
That's
pizza is
the-
never going to be a healthy food. You can blot as much oil off of it as you like. You're only hurting yourself.
100%. When they like lay the napkin over the whole top of the pizza and pull off, I'm like, no, you missed the whole point, guys.
Right. So if you've got cup and char pepperoni and you're working towards that typical American audience, it's not going to win. And so having flatter pepperoni is sort of the American compromise.
It is.
Towards mediocrity. And right. So it's not one that I support, but I recognize why people like it. So my favorite pizza topping, right, and it's one. Right.
Ooh.
The Cobb and Sharp pepperoni is really number 2. But when I'm looking to evaluate a pizza parlor, the thing that I am getting is I'm getting their sausage, because their sausage will tell me a lot.
You'd have liked
about-
Patelli's. Patelli's made
Right.
their own sausage right there in the shop, right in front of us, and I was like, this place understands it.
Exactly.
Also, they were a little mean about their hours, and anywhere that's like I can make up my own hours means, yeah, you're probably making a good pie.
yeah, it's not that hard to make your own sausage. It's a commitment to quality. It's a commitment to craft.
Yeah.
And how you cook it and how it goes on the pizza is also fantastic. It can also be illuminating to how a shop thinks about food. So one of my favorite sausage pies from this place upstate, they do their sausage loose and they put it on the pie uncooked.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. And so then not only in that hot oven does it get really crispy crust on the outside, but some of that fat renders out, and then you've got that perfume.
You've
of
got the right
sausage.
differentiation of the texture. Really crispy, somewhat burnt on the outside, and just cooked on the inside. Like, people are scared of undercooked pork on some level, and they should be. 100%. Cook your pork correctly. Do not do it wrong. But like in a pizza oven, you are cooking a little tiny break off of loose sausage. Easy peasy.
Yeah.
No worries, no risks.
Yep. So good.
I think that the place up Frolicker's, I wish I could remember the city. I'm going to in a minute. It's where Journeyman Distillery is up there, and they've got one of the oldest butcher shop right there, making summer sausage and liver sausage right in there. And it was funny. This little Patelli's Pizza was making their own sausage. It was exceptionally good, and like their pizza that we had, and we ordered like 3, which we should have ordered 1, but we ordered 3 between us because my kids, again, you've heard me say, are very picky. The right amount of heat. Like, so I've got an 11 and 9-year-old, and any kind of spiciness, I mean, they think black pepper is spicy on occasions, can be a warning sign that they are not going to eat the pizza. And when you've got a very picky child and you just want them to eat anything, which is why we ate so much pizza up there, that can be a risk. And Patelli's, like, their heat was just right. Like, I know it's there. It's not really unpleasant. It's just like, that's the happy place. Because that's what I feel like a lot of any of the tomato red sauces that miss is when they don't have that. Because the purest of that beautiful, fresh, clean basil tomato sauce, sure, 100%. I'm not against it. But I want that little bit of spice sitting in the back.
Right. And to make that basil thing work, it really also has to be summer.
Yeah.
Right,
You've got a
right.
window of like 3 weeks,
Yeah,
and like
right.
real 3 weeks.
Yes. No. So there's a lot of toppings that can go on pizza that are very seasonal. I do want to do a shout out to my old pizza eating buddy Steve, because he came up with this trifecta of toppings that we affectionately called the Steve N. Right. That this was the pizza, and for him, right, the idea was that and there's some pizzas that are great on their own. Right, and that they're plain, they're unadulterated, they're just magnificent. There are other types and styles of pizza that really call for toppings. And what Steve's idea was that if there is a pizza that might not be all that great on its own, perhaps it can be improved with the correct blend of toppings. And for him, those 3 toppings were bacon, Canadian bacon, and jalapeno pepper.
Ooh.
And it was a really interesting combination from a textural and flavor standpoint, right? So you've got some crispiness from the bacon, you've got that sort of meatiness and a little bit of sweet from the Canadian bacon, which we will affectionately call ham.
Yeah.
Right, and then
Okay.
that is all nicely balanced by the jalapeno and adding a little bit of that heat to it. I've modified the Steve N to take. Not everybody has Canadian bacon,
Sure.
on their menu. And as I
And
mentioned,
real Canadian bacon's much harder to come by because, especially in the world of pizza, mostly it's commodity things that make their way there.
Sure. All right. And bacon is another really good topping to sort of get a sense of a pizza place's commitment to quality.
Yep.
And right. So I've modified that to do bacon, and instead of the Canadian bacon, do the sausage, because then I also get that. But having that jalapeno is that I call it the modified Steve N.
So Joni, my wife, she works here. We're recording over at Zing Train. Brought us home some Edward sausage from one of the seminars. That is an exceptionally good sausage. The tightness and the saltiness that's on there, maybe not the crispiness, because it never really crispens up like that. It kind of dries out, if anything. But, the saltiness on that. We've been eating it for breakfast. It's going on the pizza tonight when we get home tonight.
Right, and I would also highly recommend Grandma Broadbent's sausage
Yeah.
too, because because that is just so intense, and it's to be clear, it's the MSG in that.
Oh,
pizza, right?
100%. See, the world, I think that today's generation or foodies talking right now, MSG isn't really in their brain cell. I remember, like, for our generation, it was the evil child. You weren't allowed to talk about it. Everyone thought it was a bad thing. MSG it totally has been proven to be okay. Maybe you don't want to use and abuse it in there, but yeah, I remember that, like, finish of the MSG in there was amazing.
Yes, and then it's also smoked as well. So
Yep.
and for me, it's the sausage that eats like bacon.
Yep.
And just
Yeah,
I
they've got
would
it on
love
the
to go
Roadhouse
pizza.
breakfast menu as their exclusive now, I think. It's their exclusive sausage.
Brilliant stuff.
All right, we're getting up here towards the end. I think for us talking about those like regional pizzas, we covered a lot of them. The one we didn't really talk about at this point and is the Detroit style pizza a little depth wise. Definitely a bit more controversial. And when I think of it, like my first introduction is don't judge me over there, but probably was either Jets pizza, which is everywhere, super convenient if you're a parent, especially in Chelsea. Thank you, Jets, for supporting my children when I'm not home. But then also like Buddy's Pizza, which is a very different version of like the Detroit style deep style pizza. What is that for you, Daniel?
So right, I think Buddy's thing is a very interesting piece. It's kind of like the Pizzeria Uno of Detroit,
Yeah,
right? Because it started off as one place and it's expanded and it has.
Co-founder of Zingerman's Paul Saginaw loves a Buddy's Pizza. He has taken me to Buddy Pizza multiple times. I'm like, I don't get this, and it's not that bad. I like the pizza, and again, not batting a place. It's just not the same as other like Detroit style pizzas that I've had in the past.
Right. So there are the old guards of the Detroit style, and Buddy's is one of them. Louis is another one, and Cloverleaf is going to be.
Wow, I feel bad I've not had any of the other two.
Well, we should go, and I would love to do a whole another podcast just to go deeper into Detroit, because the ones that we haven't talked about at all, if we're thinking about sort of the Midwest and maybe loosely, right, is also there's a Buffalo style pizza, and then there's a Quad City style pizza.
Yeah, I'd written
Illinois,
down Quad
Iowa,
City
right.
down here as one of the ones for us to talk. This
Right.
feels like we're probably going to end up back here 3 or 4 times talking pizza.
Absolutely. But this is a good, I think, a good foundation. I think it's a good base to lay upon. It's a nice crust.
Sure.
Right?
So we had our offsite this year in Mexico. Went to Mexico City. A group of us went out to Oaxaca, and I recently made this lovely lady gave me her actual recipe for Oaxacan black mole. And I'm like, well, I'm putting that on pizza. So that's sitting in my fridge. So I'd made a batch for a cocktail class we did. It's sitting in my fridge. I'm making a mole pizza. It's going to be amazing. I have 0% question of how delicious this thing is. It will never make it to the world of pizza because it has all the nuts allergies known to man in this thing. But like that to me is going to, like that's original already smoky flavor in there. Is kind of that piece.
Right. So I love this idea of taking sort of classics and moving them and elevating them. So I would be remiss about
Sorry, coming back to Detroit.
about Detroit to not mention some of the newer upstarts who are also doing good things like Grandma Bob's and Michigan and Trumbull.
Oh my goodness!
so-
I feel like I need to go to Detroit with you for a couple of nights.
I know, and it's my fault. I apologize for not
Can we
organizing.
play a game of blackjack and then go and eat pizza pie? That would be a happy place.
And maybe we can squeeze in some pinball along the way.
We can do some pinball. I'm okay with some pinball.
Nice.
Pizza.
Marvelous.
I think when we talk about pizza, one of those things. So I'm going home to cook it tonight, and I think we talked about this in the past, off mic, previous recordings of different things. When you're cooking at home, it's very hard to get that oven so hot, and so one of the tricks I've always had is pre-toasted flour as the thing I finish rolling my pizza in, and it goes in the oven on pre-toasted flour, so that can scorch much quicker, and it creates that kind of over smell. And the reason is I was French classically trained, and you always had brown flour. Brown flour was to thicken your sauces. It was one of those main ingredients you had to have. So knowing I had it on hand all the time, it became this very natural thing to use in there. But I think that power of like the quick meal, when we think about ordering it, it seems very convenient. But I will tell you, like, as a parent of 2 kids who gets home at like I get home at 4:30, my kid's first thing is at like 5:45. I can make my kids a thin crust pizza in an oven, in that window, and out the door. Like high quality, delicious. The thing is, having the dough pre-made in that world.
Right. And it doesn't even have to be high quality, right? Like I think this is the nice thing about cooking at home, and this is kind of what we talked about sitting around the dinner table. Let's not like the enemy of the good. You're cooking at home. Not everybody is a classically trained chef, right? And you can just make anything with something like the dough and something like a sauce and some sort of cheesy topping. So I made during Passover for the family. I made it was a Detroit style matzah pizza.
Nice.
So it had a matzah brie base, and then just put the some cheese on top of that. Did some Reggiano around the outside edges, and then tomato sauce around the top. There was a little bit of it was not kind of pepperoni. It was kind of like a sliced chorizo thing. But it was delightful.
You can come back and judge me because, yes, French classically trained. I've cooked in 27 countries. But my child, we were home and I got home late. They were already home. I got home late and Owen wanted pizza. We didn't have any dough in the fridge. And honestly, there was no time to do it. He goes, well, use this. And he pulls out a flour tortilla. And we made flour tortilla pizzas. And you know what? He was so happy.
Yes.
He didn't care 1 ounce. And I will tell you, completely fine.
Yeah.
It worked great.
Right, and the dough doesn't. Right, there will be recipes for Detroit style pizza dough that are differentiated from New York style pizza dough. But if you go to Trader Joe's and you buy some prepared dough and you just put it in a buttered pan and throw some stuff on it, pretend it's Detroit style pizza. And I know that is really horribly insulting for the people who really make Detroit style pizza and do it well, but it can serve as a model. We can take these lessons from the past of just using the ingredients you have on hand and turning it into something delicious.
Yeah, talking of flour tortilla, I have abused and used ingredients in my kitchen many times to make pizza because it is, I think, one of the 5 foods that Owen currently consumes in our house. Daniel, Lee, thank you both so much. I think we're coming back into this world to talk about it. I think we probably need to end up deep diving into some different pieces, like really stay in that Detroit. And having just come back from New Buffalo and probably having eaten at least at 5, I think we went to 6 pizza joints in the course of 2 days.
We can do 5. We can do
4.
5 in a day.
Yeah. And
right, I'm committed.
And you just take the group to go do it. And I think when you've mentioned the names of places, that's the piece. With the kids watching TikTok, I shouldn't be. But watching the one bite slice pizza review, they love that. So whenever we eat pizza as kids, we will do that.
I may have to deprogram your kids because I've got some other issues, but we will talk.
They need some heavy deprogramming over the world. So I want to thank you all. Thank you for joining the Heartland Hot Dish. Daniel, Lee, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks, my lovelies.